We're in the middle of a mobility revolution right now. What we're doing is creating a racing series to catalyze that industry. The Airspeeder mission is to be the race that creates the ultimate flying car. This is not a new air race, this is motorsport in the sky.
Hello. I want a flying car, and racing is the way to get there. The path to mass adoption has been trodden before. Henry Ford was a racing driver. Marcel Renault was a racing driver. Lionel Martin of Aston Martin was a racing driver. Charles Rolls of Rolls-Royce was a racing driver. The first Mercedes were racing cars. The first Fiats were racing cars. And there's a reason that the winners on the track 120 years ago became the winners in industry over the century that followed. Now, I want to talk about adoption because it is hard. I want to talk about, I don't have a lot of time, but I want to talk about one problem and one opportunity. Problem is adoption. How do you get people to fall in love ultimately with these vehicles? And how do you move the world towards the infrastructure, the regulation, all this environment that we need, the charging, and the vehicles ultimately that we're going to have in our daily lives. So adoption, the issue with getting to adoption is, first of all, NASA did this a few weeks ago. They went out and said, we want to know how far away is your air taxi port? Like, how far will you travel into town on an air taxi? And people said, we have no idea what you're talking about. We've never heard of this. So the first problem is awareness. If you can't get people to actually know anything about air taxis, how are you going to get them comfortable with the idea of having them in their backyards, in their garage, ultimately in their skies? So to get to adoption, I mean, the racing has done that before. As a showcase methodology, having a Formula One, having the Gordon Bennett Trophy and all the races that happened in the 20s and 30s, that was the way that people sold cars. And it's why Mercedes started racing 120 years ago and is still racing today. It's to sell cars. The opportunity is that basically, I believe, if you look at Ubers today, shared mobility is an interesting thing. People say air taxis are going to be shared. People are going to hail a Lilium or a Joby on an app, on a ride-sharing app, and rock up, and suddenly they'll travel to a vertiport, they'll fly across town. Great. The challenge is, I mean, we have helicopters. I mean, how many people arrived at this event? And this is a pretty elite event, elite group. How many people arrived by helicopter today? Yeah, not so many. Yeah, a couple did, sure. And moving from helicopters to electric helicopters is great, but I'm not sure it's going to be the huge wave that when we talk about science fiction and flying cars in our daily lives. That's not exactly what we're talking about, but all the work that's been done on air taxis is paving the way to that future, to private air mobility, and I see that as coming. If you look at Ubers in the US, for instance, there are 1 million Uber cars now. There are 275 million private cars. So I don't know what the ratio is going to be for eVTOL, for private eVTOL. It might not be 275 to 1, but maybe, is it 100 to 1? Is it 10 to 1? The point is that I think smaller VTOLs that people own themselves and fly themselves are going to be a very big market. And the way to get there is racing. So you see for electric cars, we have Formula E. For electric SUVs, we have Extreme E. You've seen the powerboat, the electric powerboat outside, which is, electric powerboat racing is coming with E1. And so we have Airspeeder for electric flying cars. That's what we're building. That's why we're here. We're raising capital at the moment to bring this to this part of the world, to race here and around the rest of the world. And ultimately, that's how we develop adoption for flying cars in our daily lives. And that's how I get my flying sports car. Thank you.